Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters. It's Friday night. It's the three Amigos night. Good evening to Mitch and Steve. How are you, lads?
Very well, Mitch. Very well.
Very good.
Good to see. Mitch is doing well. 8.5 hours into a session, and he's managed to pull himself into a venue to do the show. Steve's been practicing his rant. And what we should have done was we should have rehearsed "Only Fools and Horses" theme tune and sang that for coming in with that. Well done.
I feel like Uncle Albert today, I tell you.
What do? That's what I feel like. And I just want to use this opportunity to say I absolutely hate bloody Facebook. Completely knocked me account this week just by deleting it. Yeah, thanks, Facebook. Great. Wonderful. Photos, everything on there just gone. I know they've got rules, but there should be really something done about Mark Zuckerberg having that kind of control. I'll certainly not be using Facebook in the same way, shape or form again. Certainly won't be loading photographs and stuff on there. My own fault. Should have backed them up. But yeah, thanks, Facebook. You're a bunch of twats. So that's my rant out of the way.
Excellent.
Before we start on football. God, where do we start? I mean, God, every time I type the thing in for YouTube and go, the lads look back on the 7 days of, I think I put post-mortem this week. That's what it feels like. We've moved on from the takeover. We're back into the football, and that's getting worse. I mean, God, yeah. Mitch, honestly, we know it's going to be bad, right? We know it's not going to be a feast of football under Bruce. We know he's going to have to stick with Joe Linton because they spent 40 million on him. But then, within the space of 2 days, I bump into Dwight Gill in the Metro Centre with his bloody leg out, with a screw in it. So he's out for months with a knee injury of some description. And then we get the great news, not from Newcastle, from the Czech Republic's physio, that Dubravka, who was undoubtedly our best player last season, is now injured. Some kind of ligament damage. We don't know what the hell it is as yet, but we know that he's going to be missing at least until October. What a bloody week.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? I've not seen such a meltdown over two injuries for such a long time. Dubravka obviously is a key part of our team. And some of the, yes, I criticise him on occasions because sometimes he'll make ricks. But you know what? A keeper making that many saves is going to make a rick every now and again because he isn't really being protected very well. That said, in Darlow, I genuinely believe we do have a capable deputy. I know he's not had much chance in the last, couple of years, but I think we do have a capable deputy there. But then we're going into meltdown over a goal scorer who hasn't really done better than 1 in 4 or 5. But that shows the absolute lack of depth we have at striker. That somebody missing who is that poor in terms of return is going to make such a difference to the side that we're going to go into meltdown about it. It's so frustrating. I see today that we're being linked with the lad from Celtic, Edward. I cannot believe it simply because I can't believe we're going to spend that amount of money on a striker. And that frustrates and irritates, and a lot more besides. And I genuinely can't work it out. But 2 injuries, and genuinely as a fan base, we're on the edge of meltdown, and I can totally understand why.
Yeah, Steve, I mean, meltdown, it has been. I mean, obviously social media is more of a meltdown than probably real life. But, it hasn't been a good week, has it? I mean, with the exception of bringing Hendricks in, which, we're all left really in this kind of Mike Ashley zone these days where we'll go, yeah, well, it's a good signing. But yeah, it's a good signing under Mike Ashley. Is Hendricks really the kind of player that's going to set the world alight on, at St. James's Park? I doubt it. But, God, these injuries. I mean, Dubravka's catastrophic. It really is for our season. And as for Dwight Gill, the kid was in form. But, if I accept what Mitch is saying, but the other side of it is, if we had to sell him to bring somebody better in, then now we can't sell him because he's injured.
Exactly. I think I got a message this morning from Benny Mag. He sends some great messages through, but this one really hit home. I forwarded it on to you guys. He just put Dubs out, Gale out, takeover ignored, no signings in sight, one barely fit striker, £40 million player quarantined, accounts late again, Charlie nowhere, Bruce can't improve a strike force who can't score, Mike Ashley still here, one left back, fans sick as F. Welcome to Newcastle 2020. And you know what? I thought, if I say that, then I could actually shut up for the rest of the show. I wouldn't need a rant because I've got Spenny rant for us, absolutely perfect. In one paragraph, he summed up the close season for us from the minute we played that. Well, in fact, it also sums up where we were before we got to the point of our last game last season, because we were on a disastrous run anyway. He hasn't mentioned that, but maybe we should throw that one into the mix as well. 2 wins in 8 or 2 wins in 9, I think we ended up with. But absolutely shambolic. You can coin that phrase that was used in the play. You couldn't make it up. And when it comes to Newcastle, you can make it up. You can make up anything you like because it will probably come true, or it'll ring true, or it'll be true. In this particular instance, you've got all of that, and it's absolutely spot on. Dubravka, that's a disaster. Probably, the key position for us based on what we saw last season. But it looks like we're going to go. There's a fortnight to go at the start of the season. There was a bit of an argument on Twitter this morning about it. We've got a 40 million striker who is now in quarantine for 2 weeks because he was allowed to go on holiday to somewhere where you're guaranteed there was going to be a quarantine when he came back. So surely he could have come back a fortnight early from his holidays and had his quarantine so that he would be ready for pre-season training. But no, it now eats into the pre-season training period, Absolutely, that's who looks after that part of the team management when it comes to deciding and advising players on where they should be going on holiday, what the implications are when they come back. I appreciate the likes of Spain and France that were thrown into the mix late on, and a lot of people are being caught out. But the very fact that we ended up in a situation where there's no team management, there's no one that looks after the first team squad, advises the first team squad, gives them the advice and guidance that's needed within our football club. That in itself is absolutely shambolic, especially during the current crisis that we've had, that we've known about since March, that every single person in the country has been caught up in COVID. And yet we find ourselves, I suppose it could be worse. He could actually have it. But if he had it, if he had tested positive, he'd be out after a week. Instead, he's in quarantine for a fortnight. Pogba will be out for a week. The Chelsea squad, there's 6 out of 8 of their squad who all went on holiday together, or bumped into each other, or have mixed with players from other teams. You know what? It's going to be very interesting to start the season. How many teams actually do get decimated by either players in quarantine or players that have had positive tests. And it's also going to be interesting to see how those players react and perform when we do get back into the flow of football. If we ever see that is, because the chances are we're not going to be able to watch it because it's not even going to be on telly.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you couldn't make this up, could you? Samantha agrees the Joe Linton quarantine situation is so responsible, the club and the player. Kieran's asking if there's any news on the takeover, or is it still being worked on silently? Our understanding is that it's still being worked on silently, and I think the less we hear about it, the better.
Yeah, Bjork's running it, isn't she?
Sorry?
Bjork is in charge. It's also silent.
It's all silent. Aye, very quick for a Friday night. Mitch, I've seen a question there because I don't want to get bogged down in takeover talk. There's nothing to discuss really on that scene. Been surprisingly no new bidders, so that's good news anyway. Transfer budget. I saw a question there. Have we got a transfer budget? It's $1 million question, isn't it? Because we don't actually know, Mitch, whether we have got one or not. We've pulled in 2 frees, haven't we? And that's it.
We've got an owner who I genuinely believe was planning not to be here by this time, and therefore, do we have a transfer budget which is done on the hoof? Which, to me, that's what it feels like. it's really difficult to watch other teams spending a lot of money when we're being told that everything's austerity now. But some of those teams are ones that historically have always had a lot of money to spend, and perhaps their owners are turning around and saying, okay, FFP is not going to matter for the next 2 years, so let's just do it. So that might be the case. At the same time, what is Ashley's planning here at the moment? Is he just delaying everything to the last moment in case something happens? Or we're going to see suddenly a hive of activity towards the end of the transfer window if something different happens, if something changes? We just don't know what's going on. And to be fair, that's the way he's run the club for a long time. He wants it to wash its face on its own. So I don't expect him to dip his hand into his pocket at the moment, particularly if he thinks and still believes something's going to change. Perhaps, however, if something doesn't change in that time and we get towards the end of the transfer window and he wants to protect the value of the club he's trying to sell, then he might have to do something. Either way, it's not a plan, is it, really? It's just reactionary. And I get the distinct impression that as a fan base, we're going to be just kept on tenterhooks for the entire transfer window now, up until the end of it. And I get the degree of frustration that's now going to run through the fan base at the moment. Really, really frustration. I'll see that question there about Leeds spending big money. Yeah. Bearing in mind, Leeds is a club that genuinely, I can tell you straight away, that the owner of Leeds was trying to sell it all the way up till February, and it got called off because of COVID. He was dropping the asking price, and the buyers were backing away, and the guy that was doing the middleman work was just said, right, after COVID, stop it. And so to see them really praising their owner for what he's done when as recently as February he was trying to get rid of the blinking club, but then they suddenly seem to have a budget to spend 30 million on one player, and that allegedly is almost all of our transfer budget. None of it makes sense.
No, it doesn't. And yes, are you agreeing with Mitch there, Steve, that we're on on this kind of road now towards maybe transfer deadline day where we might get a couple of loans in? We're going to be left on tenterhooks all the way through. There isn't really a budget, and of course Ashley will be hoping that he doesn't have to spend anything because he's looking to leave the club. He'd be hoping a takeover can be done, and then it's the problem of the new owners.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had a transfer budget under Ashley, to be perfectly honest. There's been figures bandied around, but everybody knows that that includes under Ashley paying cash for players. It involves agents' fees, it involves signing on fees, and it involves the players' wages over the period of their contract, most of which tend to be 4 or 5 year contracts by the minimum, because he wants to add that on to the value of the football club, because he's got players then tied into long-term contracts, and it looks good. So I don't think we've ever, even under Rafa, I don't think Rafa was ever given a budget. I think he was, I think what was told was, well, you can have, not even X amount. I think it was very much a case of almost sticking a knife in and twisting it and seeing where you could get. Like one of those clocks, isn't it? Where you have to wind up all the time, like your grandfather clock, and you keep having to turn it before you actually get the pointers to go. And I think that's what it's like when you're dealing with Mike Ashley. And Neil will agree. It was like that when we sat and tried to understand when they sold, I think it was Shea Given to Man City, yep. And I remember sitting in front of Eric Lambias and him saying, what I said to him, why we sold Shea Given for £7.5 million to what is now the richest football club in the world, Man City, and why have you sold them and given Man City terms? Why are they getting terms? Why is the money spread over 4 years? And at the same
4 years, yeah, it was.
Paid cash in a massive lumper for somebody else that's come in. And it was like, because it just didn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And the whole synopsis was based around the fact that if you did it that way, you could get the player you were buying for slightly less because you were given a huge lump sum. You weren't drip feeding it, but it could not get them to break that mentality. And I think that mentality's carried on all the way through Ashley's reign. And I'll go back to the point: we don't have a budget, and we will undoubtedly be in that bargain basement, free transfer.
Could not spend the 17 million like Sean's suggesting. He's saying he's got 17 million pound off PCP. Well, can he not spend that?
Apparently he did, but that didn't come to Newcastle United. That went straight to Mike Ashley, didn't it? You know, maybe he's going to use that as part of his legal fight if he ever has to go down that track. I don't know, but if you remember, the only time I felt as depressed about transfer budgets and things like that was the time when I think under Shepherd, where we only went out and got Lee Boyer on a free. And that was the only time when you thought it was a time where the club actually needed to really invest in a couple of decent positions, and they didn't. And then the whole thing just tumbled after that, you know. And that's the sort of, you know, it's like I remember Shepherd going, well, the door's shut. We can't get any more money out the bank. There's no money. They can't do it. And we got one signing in, and it was somebody on a free that particular season because we'd spent in the January or whatever. But under Ashley, they don't even get the quality in the January.
Nope.
Somebody talked earlier on about whether Willems would be a good signing, and apparently the chances are that he might be available on a free, or he might be available on a much reduced fee because he's only got a year left on his contract and he's still injured. I think the key was he's still injured, so I wouldn't even take him on a free myself. I would be saying I'll have him on loan for another season and see whether or not the guy is going to be able to produce the form that he had before the injury. But I think in a key position like that, of left back, I know you could get injured in the first game of the season. You could be the fittest fullback you've ever seen and get injured in the first game. But I think actually signing someone who's a crock, and I don't mean that disparagingly, but signing someone who's coming back from a serious knee injury would be foolhardy. But I wouldn't be surprised if it happened.
Yeah, me neither. DW Sports, of course. Yeah, we've seen that this week. Mike Ashley always seems to buy a business when we could be spending money on players. Just off topic, I suppose, off Newcastle topic anyway, Mitch. Messi. Gerard's asking what our opinions are about him coming to the Premier League, you know, potentially linking up with Pep Guardiola. I've got to be honest, I look at this and I think, you know, Messi, yeah, great player, but he's never played outside of Barcelona, unlike Ronaldo. Nope. There's a lot of pressure on him. Probably not as much pressure as going to be on Joe Linton this season, but there's pressure on Messi coming to the Premier League because he comes with such a dazzling reputation. He's got to hit the ground running, hasn't he? And he's expected then, I think the key for me is he's expected to be part of a team. Not everything's resting on his shoulders. So good move for him. What's your view?
I'm not convinced he'll leave. I think this hand on the transfer request in is him saying to the chairman and the club, right, I'm off unless you do something about it. And I think you'll see the president resign. I think you'll see a shake up behind the scenes, and then suddenly all will be well again, and they'll start to sign players of some regard. If not, they've brought Koeman in to be bad cop, and he'll do all the horrible things, clear out. And over the next 18 months, you'll see a transformation in Barcelona, and then they'll bring Xavi back from Qatar, and then everything will be all well in the world again. And perhaps Messi, if he's gone, will come back. I don't think it's the end of Messi's relationship with Barcelona. I think it's a power play move to get what he wants behind the scenes.
Interesting. Steve, would you agree?
I would actually. I would. I think it's a power play. I listened to the radio and they said this morning I was out driving. I've been driving most of the day, and on one of the earlier radio shows that I was listening to, they talked about this saga because that's what it's going to be drawn out into. It's going to become a saga. And they said that nobody's bigger than Barcelona except Messi. And I just went, yeah, that's right. That is exactly it. There's nobody bigger than Barcelona except Messi. Messi is Barcelona. And I think because of the structure of Barcelona, where they have a president that lasts for 4 years, and they have a fan base that votes people in, and that particular person has to say exactly what his plans are. Be very interesting to know, because I can see an extraordinary general meeting being called in Barcelona very, very soon, and I can see that particular president is going to have to lay it on the line and say exactly what his plans are for Barcelona. And I think Messi holds all the cards. I think the Ronald Koeman, they only give him 2-year contract. Was that 2 years so that after a 1 year he'd be gone? He pulled up loads of trees, didn't he, at Everton when he was there? Caused absolute uproar. I think Koeman's shown that what he was very good at was being an international manager. And I think it's all geared up for Xavi to come back, and for then Messi to have a last few couple of seasons with them, and then move in alongside Xavi and have a swan song. I know that I listened to this afternoon's show where they were talking about the fact that Man City were going to offer him the world. They were going to offer him potentially a 2 or 3 year contract. Then he would go to New York and he would finish up his career and he'd become part of some sort of ambassadorial role. The guy can't even speak English. You know, he's Spanish through and through. That's why he's been to Barcelona since he was 10-year-old. And everything about him is Spanish. I know the link is with Guardiola, but even Guardiola's position at Man City isn't exactly set in stone, because he gets itchy feet. He'll move on. They didn't win the Champions League this year. They're going to be under pressure to win the league next year and the Champions League. And I honestly cannot see Messi leaving Barcelona.
Interesting. Other non-related Newcastle topic we've got this week, Mitch, is of course Harry Maguire and his night out, which led to him getting involved in an incident which saw him arrested, jailed, convicted, released, managed to get back to the UK, and then he's done a rather long interview with Dan Rowan this morning. That's Dan Rowan, who took photographs of Amanda Staveley in court and got a rap over the knuckles by the judge. Essentially he more or less proclaims he's innocent. He does a better interview with Dan Rowan than Prince Andrew did with that lass on Panorama or whatever it was. It's a weird situation, isn't it? He's put himself right in the middle of something here, and he was given the opportunity to play for England. Then Southgate took it off him when he was convicted. Now he's got leave to appeal, so now his conviction's squashed. He's got an appeal, which we're led to believe could take a year for that to come to bit. So I mean, what's been your take on all of that this week?
An absolute total mess. Look, at the end of the day, this highlights something I bang on about professional footballers. The utter lack of pastoral care that exists within the club structures to look after players and treat them to be professionals. If you want to use the word professional, then there's certain ways you should behave, certain ways you shouldn't. I know what the professional body in the UK with me would do in a situation like that. I wouldn't be working. Even I would be subject to a fitness to practice procedure, and that would be me for 18 months not working at all. Yes, there's two sides to every story. Yes, we all know people who've run into trouble. Certainly I do, and I'm sure you guys do as well. Run into trouble in places like Mykonos and some of the Greek islands and some of the Spanish islands.
I've been that person in my younger days.
Exactly. So, some of we've been there. And so there's two sides to it all. For somebody who said he got upset when they were hammering on his golden leg, and then he turns up for an interview wearing a pair of shorts and there's not a mark on him. Yeah. Sorry. I genuinely, that immediately for me put certain doubts in my mind. Yet at the same time, if it was my sister that had been assaulted by a group of Albanians or whatever it was, would I be able to stop myself? Good grief. I can tell you now tonight, when we've been out tonight, there's somebody had kicked off in the bar, and a couple of people that we were with were very, very respectable and restraining themselves. You know, it's always a case of, you know, two sides to every story and all that. But why, as the captain of Manchester United, do you put yourself in that position?
Yeah, exactly.
Why
That's the problem.
allow yourself to be in that position? And then as the manager of England, to nail him in a squad when all this is going on around it, and take him out and then put him back in again. I'm sorry. That reeks of credibility problems to me for both Southgate and the captain of Manchester United. Come on, look, we take the make out of Man United and we'll have a go at Man United. But at the end of the day, you know, you can't deny the status of that club and being captain of that club is a huge thing to hang on your shoulder. So why get yourself in that situation? And who's there to put his arm around him and say, look, Harry, don't do this. Don't even go there. You know, while they've also got Pogba testing positive as well, you know, in the middle of all of this, you know, that club doesn't need all this at all. And for him to then go and do that interview, and for me, that interview raises as many questions as it answers. Yeah. Like I say, if that's somebody who's been beaten senseless by the police, where's your bruises, mate? Because they wouldn't have gone in that length of time.
Yeah, it was a strange. Whenever people do these interviews, you cannot help it. I mean, you know, you'll have all kinds of body analysts and you know, that kind of thing. Steve looking at him saying, you know, not sure whether he was telling the truth there, but I mean, he's got himself out of jail for a year, really, hasn't he? He's got himself a bit of time to breathe. It's up to him if he wants to have that hanging over him. He clearly does. You know, and he's hoping that the dust will settle and you know, things will move on. And the fact that he's usually of exemplary character, probably, you know, he's hoping that's going to count in favour as well. He'll be able to drum up a few witnesses, I'm sure. So yeah, but it's a strange one, isn't it? It's just as Mitch says, Mitch has nailed it really. Why on earth put yourself in that position?
Exactly. Why put yourself in it? It's just the whole story doesn't make sense. The whole story that came out is riddled with holes. The fact that he's now claiming that he thought he was being kidnapped. That was while he was at the police station or outside the police station. After there'd already been a fight. After there'd already been after this was a bit that got me. After spending £65,000 in a bar on drinks and food. And then going to another place, and then a third place, and everybody piling into a minibus, and then pulling up in the town centre and going for a kebab. It's just like, what? And then getting into a fight, and then apparently his fiance seeing the sister talking to two people that they said looked Albanian. I mean, what difference between
what's an Albanian look like?
Looks Greek, looks Italian, looks Yugoslavian, looks Croatian, but they looked Albanian. And then from the far end of the bar, she managed to see the 20-year-old sister's eyes start to roll in the back of her head, and the girl faint. And apparently she was stabbed in the arm with something that they've now convinced themselves was Rohypnol, that she was going to then be taken off. He ran over, but they managed to put her into a minibus, and they were going to take her to the hospital in a minibus instead of taking her, instead of calling an ambulance. And then these undercover police appear, and then they're all ushered into the minibus. He then gets convinced when they're at the police station, that when they come out of the police station and they're lined up, because the driver was told by the undercover police to take them to the police station, he then lines up. He claims he's put on his hands and knees. He's kneeling there with his hands over his head. He then claims that they come out and start beating him up. He then does a runner. There's a fight breaks out. And this is all after the day before, when one of the party has already had some sort of conflict that's gone on the previous night, where he's come in and he's got cuts all over his eye, and it's obvious there's been some sort of conflict because apparently there was aggro with other supporters of other football clubs who were having a go at the fact they were Man United captain, and they were singing songs about Munich and all that, and all of this has started coming out. And then when he eventually gets released and he comes home and he sits in front of Dan Rowan, and he makes this what I thought was probably a PR mistake rather than a PR coup by getting his story in first and the sob story and all that. And then at one point saying, I think Dan Rowan asked him if he felt as though he needed to apologise, and he claimed he's got nothing to apologise for, despite the fact that he admits that he ran away. He admits that there was a confrontation with people who were police, who he's now claiming he thought weren't police. But that doesn't account for the fact there was a confrontation and you've been seen. You're fighting anyway, whether you're fighting with a policeman or you're fighting with somebody in the street that you don't know, or an Albanian gang of muggers and kidnappers. Then he said he thought he was being kidnapped when he was at the police station. There's the Albanian. There you go. and I think what he should have done, he shouldn't have said a word. He shouldn't have spoken, because everything that's coming out is now going to be ripped apart by the press and people like me, probably, and with far more brain than I am. They're going to rip his story apart. The press are going to go out and they're going to find people that were there. They're going to find people. They're going to speak to the kebab shop owners. They're going to speak to hoteliers. They're going to be searching for CCTV, and the press are going to have him bang the rights before the court manages to get him to bang the rights again. So he should have kept his mouth shut. He should have said, "I'm sorry for any trouble that I've caused in Greece that appears to have been caused. I now want to say nothing, and I want to carry on playing my football, and it'll all get sorted." But no, he went on a half an hour interview with all the people, Dan Rowan, who you couldn't trust. It's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And at the same time, he left Greece and came home. What did Man United throw his brother and his mate under the bus by making them stay there? I mean, there's another question for you. Why didn't they all go home? Was he dragged out by the lawyers at Man United and so just dump it on your brother, mate? Just if we can dump it on your brother, and we can do that. But this is where because they've opened up, the holes will start to appear and the chinks of light will start to come through. I would also add that there's every chance, and it wouldn't surprise me after 2 years, that the whole thing just disappeared. Yeah, the deals, backdoor deals will be done, and it'll be, well, it's taken so long, it's happened during a particular situation, etc., and the whole thing will just fizzle out. It'll be forgotten about, and apparently he loves Greece, he loves the culture, he loves the museums, he loves ancient history. What'll he do? Buy a museum or something, or make a donation to them? I don't know, because that's how ridiculous it was. We even came out with statements in that about how he loved the Greek culture. How way, man, how way. You wouldn't know the Greek culture if it hit you over the back of the head. Ridiculous.
Got to say, man. I made this point on Twitter, tongue in cheek a little bit, but somebody's just said, "What if that had been a Newcastle United player?" My comment was, "What if that was John Joe Shelby? How many bloody front page stories would there be now? Absolutely lambasting him, taking him to bits, absolutely hammering him, saying he should never play football again. He's a disgrace. He's this, he's that." Because that's the double-edged sword of being captain of Man United.
Go back to Joey Barton. And how Joey Barton was all over that. Joey Barton's a perfect example. What Joey Barton did was totally wrong, and Joey Barton paid for it in a big way, quite rightly too. But that was he was hung, drawn, and quartered. The videos were all over. The CCTV was all over the press for months and months beforehand, and he didn't have a leg to stand on. Joey couldn't have got out of that if he'd had the finest lawyers in the world backing him. Not a cat and hell's chance. But you're right, Man United. There's other situations that have existed with other football clubs over the years. You know, we don't need to go about them here, but you're right. If it had been John Joe Shelby or you know, anyone like that, they would have locked the door.
Yeah, like just is as well. Even Raheem Sterling would have been hung out to dry for that.
Oh,
absolutely hung out to dry. And somebody would be pointing out how many houses he has, and you know, it just what's the point?
Exactly.
You know,
Usain Bolt was positive for coronavirus, and Raheem Sterling was blamed because he happened to be at a party where he had been the day before or the day before that, and the press homed in on poor Raheem Sterling as though it was his fault. You know, this is the situation we're in at the minute with the tabloid press. It's scandalous.
While we're starting to warm up, lads, Mitch, let's talk about Amnesty International, our favourite neighbourhood complainers about this takeover. Article written in the mag. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. I know you have, and I know Steve has, and I know you're quite opinionated on it. Give us your views on it.
How many bites of the cherry is this organisation going to be allowed to have? And how many times do we have to sit and say, Newcastle United supporters are not here to solve the problems of the world. We are not here to take on our shoulders the responsibility and the all of that goes with the human rights issues, that goes with a nation whose investment fund wishes to try and buy our club. Why are we being reflected at that? Let's go back to it all. We are told as a fan base we should be grateful for Mike Ashley. Don't protest because he's saved your club. Don't be outraged because he's there to be some sort of financial saviour of Newcastle United, whilst he pushes 0-hour contracts. Well, he has a warehouse that has the worst health and safety record in the UK. There's a lot more besides. So we're told to shut up and sit down and not complain about that. But yes, we should be up in arms about something else that is also not our problem. And it isn't our problem. The supporters in Newcastle United, everything that goes with Saudi Arabia as a country and the human rights issues should not and will never be our problem to solve. Yet we've said repeatedly and shown repeatedly, as a fan base, we will ask questions about it. As a fan base, we are totally happy to say, right, we welcome your investment in the club in the region. However, there are things we maybe need to talk about. You know, let's go back to the Toontown Hall with Chion Rura and NUFC. And that was turned by certain media outlets against Newcastle United fans and saying, no, they don't back the takeover. When even the trust said 97% of our members back the takeover. But yet there were still news reports that said Newcastle fans were against it, which we all know is just manipulation of what's there. I'm very tired of our fan base and certain elements of our fan base. The MAG in particular here, they've allowed somebody to write that article, publish that article, and it turns against us. Why are we allowing people to do this? You know, it's not right. We're quite happy to ask questions. We've said before, you go back to how many boards have we asked questions of in recent history? Go back to the pirate and everything since. Dear God, Steve, there's a picture of you and me somewhere carrying bloody sack of board flags somewhere back when you had hair and I was about 3 stone lighter. You know, it's there. You know, we will ask questions of owners who are not doing the right thing for Newcastle United. We will take and welcome the partnership with Saudi Arabia quite happily and take the investment, not just for the club, but for the region. We've talked about this at length on here, so we don't have to go back over it again. But we will also be very happy to say, you're doing this and this is actually making us look like idiots. So we need to have a conversation here. And in some respects, fair play to them, because I know Arab nations, particularly since the Arab Spring, don't like being criticised, don't like people who are happy to stand up with them and say, hey, this isn't right. But we will. As a fan base and as a groups of fans, we've got enough people involved and enough people like us and the Trust and other groups as well, many other groups who will stand up and say, look, we'll welcome you on board. This is a partnership. We'll go forward together. But X, Y, Z, we're not happy about it. And we will ask those questions. To a man, we will ask those questions. And I think we've already demonstrated that. And I'm very tired of being hit with the same stick.
Yeah. Steve, what was your take on that letter by Amnesty? The article on Amnesty, sorry.
If the article had been in a mainstream newspaper when I first saw it, or it had been in a tabloid, it had been in the Guardian, it had been in the Telegraph, it had been in the Times, even if it had been in the Mirror or the Sun or the Mail, I would have read it, I'd have taken it on board, I would have respected what was being said. The fact that it was published in a Newcastle United fanzine, absolutely, I found unbelievable, to tell you the truth. I just don't know why we have within our fan base a group of people who want to, like, you know, cut off our own face despite the nose. You look at Saudi, and you look at other countries in the Middle East. Countries evolve, you know. It's revolution, not evolution. The Arab Spring was a revolution that failed, and we've seen the results of the failure. If you want to get into politics and you want to look at what happened in Egypt, you want to look at what's happened in Libya, you want to look at what's happened in Syria, all backed in some way, shape, or form by events of the Arab Spring that occurred. Countries like Saudi, there'll be a need for change and a desire for change, but they don't want revolution. They want evolution. They want that change to occur gradually. You know, I just find it fascinating that companies, you know, organizations like Amnesty expect things to happen immediately. You know, now bearing in mind that it was what the late 1960s, before homosexuality was no longer outlawed in the UK. You know, it was at the turn, not even the turn of the century, but way after that of the 20th century, before we even give women the vote. You know, and that's it. That's in the UK. Now, you're then looking at a country that I've always thought in terms of evolution. Yes, they're rich, they've got money, they've got power, they've got geopolitical power. But in terms of where the country's coming from, they're probably 60, 70 years behind us in that respect. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. And as supporters, if this takeover happened, as supporters, Mitch is absolutely spot on, that we could be part of the evolution. We could be part of showing the young people, of which I think 70% of the population are under the age of 30. They're the most Twitter used or Twitter users in the world in terms of a population per capita. And so that they're desperate for news, they're desperate to move on, they're desperate for the country to evolve. And they probably have a leadership who are wary of evolution, but know that evolution has to come. But it has to come at the right way, at the right time. And it has to be done correctly. And I think we can be part of that, absolutely part of that. If Saudi Arabia owned Newcastle United, we could be the flag bearers for helping them to evolve, because they would see what it's like in the Northeast, they would see what it's like in the UK, and the fans and the people who are supporting the football club would see the freedoms that we have, and also that the people who run the country would see how important it could be to get that way. I don't want people getting sort of all caught up in the geopolitics of it, but that's where we're heading. When we have articles like that, that's where we're heading. We're heading into questions about, well, what's Qatar? What's Qatar's role? What's Turkey's role? What's going on in Syria? What's going on in Libya? You know, because this is way above our station, and we're a football club. We're supporters of a football team, and when we've got an article there from Amnesty International, I'd have more respect for Amnesty International if the article was about trying to get Julian Assange released from prison and at least given bail, so that he could get himself fit, and we could actually see the trial that's going on with Julian Assange instead of it being behind closed doors. That type of thing. That's in the UK. That's not in Saudi, or it's not in Libya or Egypt or Oman or Bahrain. This is in the UK. We've got to look at ourselves before we start questioning what's going on in other countries. It's a much bigger picture. I'm just flabbergasted at times, absolutely flabbergasted. Where are we heading? We don't know where we're heading with a takeover. It's very much as we said right at the very beginning, it's very quiet and quite rightly so. But in terms of people actually coming out and now throwing all of this politics back in our faces, it was all sorted. All those questions were answered, as Neil said, during the Chiyamura town hall presentation that was done, and that was what, May?
Hi.
Yeah.
And now we're into August, heading into, by the end of this weekend, we're into September, and we don't need to be going back over this same question from the same organisations. Yeah,
everything that was said that night still stands, is still relevant, and everybody just chooses to ignore it and continue to beat with as a fan base with the same stick. And that's just snide. Sorry. It's not right. How else can we answer this as a fan base? Why do I have to go through the same machinations and the same drama? We've done it. We've been there. We've said our piece. We've said, yeah, okay, we recognise there's issues. We won't ignore the issues, and we certainly won't. As a fan base, we never ignore issues with owners, be that whether he runs a sweatshop, or be that whether he's just on the take, or be that he totally disrespects his players and the fan base. We don't ignore the issues. So why do I have to just keep playing this same game? It's ridiculous.
Let's talk a little bit about Chi and a petition. One person asking why essentially the petition hasn't picked up the same kind of pace as the previous one, and the second one is what can she do and when can she head into Parliament? So Mitch is why do you think this one hasn't captured the Newcastle fans' imagination as much as the first one did?
We're all exhausted. As a fan base, we're exhausted. As a fan base, and I get the feeling that, look, we've been asked to do something and we've done it, and now what? I get that. Totally get that. Everybody demanding a statement right now needs to cool their jets a little bit. There will be a statement when it can be made of that, I'm quite sure, from my interaction with people connected with PIF, people connected with PCP. If there's a statement to be made when it can be made, it will be made. Then the fan base will be totally respected and has been respected throughout all of this. So, everybody needs to cool their jets a little bit and just try and be a little bit more patient. It's super frustrating, I get it. But as a fan base, we're suffering fatigue. Everybody said, well, I've signed this petition. What's this petition all about? It's a very different petition. It's one that actually carries a little bit more political weight. And in some respects, it's probably a more important petition to sign because it carries a little bit more political weight. But I also get that takeover exhaustion feeling, because I can promise everybody sitting at home, and I hope I'm not speaking for you two guys, but I don't think anybody's suffered more takeover fatigue than us three in some respect.
Yeah, Steve, it has been a long haul, but I mean, she is trying her best. I mean, she can go into the Houses of Parliament and essentially, take the Premier League to toll, using the correct ways and methods in Parliament. But a lot of people comment there. You've seen them on screen, and Mitch has nailed it. Takeover fatigue. A lot of people are just sick of the whole thing. Seen a lot of people saying Amanda Staveley should come out and say something, but as I keep saying, she will say something. Once the deal's dead, she will come out and say the deal's dead. If they take the club over, she'll be on the pitch saying that Newcastle United's in the hands of new owners. I think it's as simple as that. But the Chiomura thing, she is trying her best and she's doing it for the right reasons.
That's right. I mean, the difference between what she's trying to do is she's wanting to have a debate in Parliament and wanting to bring the Premier League back in front of the select committee and to talk about the governance of football and talk about the whole aspect of the transparency with football. The transparency argument or discussion that's come about because of Newcastle's takeover is how untransparent the Premier League are. Yeah. The fact that they turned up the last time with on a totally different topic and were able to just bat away the questions through the fact that there was an NDA in place and it was confidential, which is what he did all the way along. It's a different ballgame now for Parliament because it looks as though the deal has been pushed to one side. It now gives them the opportunity to talk. It now gives the opportunity to get that stick into the beehive or into the wasp's nest and start prodding it and poking it and start questioning the Premier League about that process, about the way that the Premier League operate, the way that the Premier League are transparent or not transparent, and the way that their whole manner in which they run themselves is managed, if you like. It's a different argument to whether or not they should have let Newcastle United deal go through, but it's quite pertinent for football in general and in terms of takeovers in particular, that some very, very good questions about transparency and how the Premier League operates could come to the fore. And with some good points, with some good questioning, with some salient and interesting questions that could be laid at the Premier League door, that in itself could open up a can of worms, if you like, that give the Premier League a massive, massive headache. Some questions would, there's that statement, isn't there? Questions were asked in Parliament. When questions start to get asked, when people start to dig, when people start to look under the surface of how the Premier League operates. For example, when the Premier League turn around and go, they wanted more information, and they need more information, and they need validity, and they need confirmation of who it is that's going to be running the football club. I think most football fans would turn around and go, yeah, that's important. When we've seen in the football circles what's happened to Bury, when we've seen what's happened to Wigan in very recent times, but it's the Newcastle deal that's come to a head where all of a sudden the Premier League itself, because the Premier League's nothing to do with Wigan and it's nothing to do with Bury, that's the EFL. But when it's got to the point where they're questioning the directorship and the rules governing corporations that run football clubs, and they're questioning the validity and the law around what those directors are allowed to do or not, and they're bringing their own rules in over and above that, then it suddenly becomes questionable. Because although the board of the Premier League will say they're responsible, they claim they were responsible for every decision made. They claim that there was no influence, no undue influence. Yet we've seen, as I mentioned last week, we've seen that letters were put forward, and we've seen the Premier League actually acknowledge and speak about and say that they would take things into consideration that were nothing to do with the owners and directors tests, which implies, because of the way that they've structured their answer, that there is undue influence can come to play. So if there's undue influence from outside the Premier League, what about the influence from the 20 people, the 20 companies, the 20 football clubs, 19 of which could gang up on one to decide who owns or doesn't own that particular football club?
Yeah.
And that's the nub of the argument, is whether or not the whole structure of the Premier League gives influence, whether it's outside or within, and allows that influence to come to bear on a company that is running somebody else's football club. Can Manchester United influence the ownership of Newcastle? Can Liverpool or Tottenham or Burnley or Crystal Palace or Arsenal or any of the other 19 clubs have an influence on who runs Newcastle United? Can Newcastle United have an influence on who runs Man United? If the other 18 clubs decide, or you only need 16 to get something through, or 14, I think, isn't it? 6 is the other way. That's the question that Chi and Wura can start to dig into if we support a petition, because it'll happen anyway. But the numbers game gives it more and more strength and more credibility, and it gives her the backing of the city, and it gives her the backing from other football clubs, from supporters rather of other football clubs, because it turns it into a national thing, not a parochial thing, not a regional thing, but it turns it into a national thing, which could turn into a national scandal.
Well, look, Steve, we were told early on by somebody who helped us with the BZG stuff that he was aware of 6 clubs preparing objections.
Yeah.
And there weren't top 6 clubs, not all of them. You know, and it's like, well, how can they object? What have they got to object, and what leverage do they have? And it keeps coming back to these shareholder meetings that they keep referring to, the shareholder meetings, where they've said they met with beIN Sports openly. That's on record. Yeah. On record from Richard Masters. Mm-hmm. Doesn't take you 2 minutes to Google it. You know, and then they turn around and say no external influences. Well, hang on. Why are you having these meetings then?
Yeah. It's the semantics of what's external and what's internal.
What's internal?
Right? Yeah. Say, well, okay, internally, there's 20 clubs or 19 clubs influencing our decision. Externally, none. Because they're all in the gang. They're all in the pot. Yeah. Right? That's the key. They're all in there, fighting from the inside. And he used semantics like no external influences, which means that Man United can influence, Tottenham can influence, Chelsea. And what you're saying, Mitch, remember that when we were told of the 6 clubs, it was 6 clubs at the time that were all below us. And the threat was that we, by moving up the league, meant that there was more chance of those
leave them behind.
Clubs falling into the relegation zone and slipping out of the cosy club that they were in. Because as long as we're down there, we become one of 7. And it means that little fight that goes on becomes slightly better for them. Not worse, better. Because it's 3 of 7, not 3 of 6. That's where the panic was. And at the time in February when we discussed this with that particular gentleman that you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And quite right as well.
Mitch, we're seeing the cartel in action again. Lots of people mentioning it tonight that, surprise, surprise, they now seem to want the 5 substitutes. They voted on it. They said they didn't want it. Now, Mitch, they've changed their mind. Now they want the 5 substitutes, and they're having a meeting on the 3rd of September to sort it out.
Yeah, and I still think the convenience of COVID allowed the Premier League to do certain things that they've wanted to do for a long time, and get it in our mindset that these things will happen, and get in our mindset to accept it as fans, because 5 substitutes suits the teams with the big squads. It wouldn't surprise me to see these water breaks halfway through half time to turn it into quarters, because that's an advertising opportunity. And if that's an advertising opportunity, that's something you can sell to generate cash for the game.
Will it be a cup of tea break in the winter?
Right. Exactly.
Bovril.
Bovril break.
Costa.
Aye.
The Costa do Bovril. Well,
Didn't get that with Daddy.
Yeah, Steve. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it, mate? It's you know, again, like we've made our mind up. This is what we're going to go for, and then before the season starts, we're going to change our mind. And I mean, it's they're doing it in plain sight. That's what makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You just. I mean, what is it? I think we've had. I think Chelsea spent something like £220 million so far on players. They picked up a guy today for a free. He's 36-year-old. But apart from that, it looks like they're going to spend upwards of £220 million. They're buying players in positions that they've already got. They're well covered on. They've cleverly milked and used the loan system by trolling, because that's what they did over a period of about the last 7 years, trolling the youth market and then throwing players out, getting those players the experience and then bringing them back and then selling them for 30, 20, 25, 40 million pound. They've been probably the worst, if you like, in terms of the way that they've manipulated and used FFP. And I know they got caught eventually. But let's face it, it turns out that the fine they got and the suspension they got has played into their hands. It's as though it was a plan, because what it's allowed them to do, it's allowed them to still qualify for the Champions League with what they've got, and it's given them a much, much bigger budget this season in the transfer market than anybody else, and they've gone out and used it by buying players for 70, 80, 90 million pounds. I mean, they're talking about Havertz for 90 million plus from Bayer Leverkusen, for example. And he's going to be the fifth one that they've brought in, on top of Werner and people like that. They've just picked up another defender. I think actually Havertz will be the sixth, because I think the defender that they've just picked up, who apparently they're going to send out on loan, strangely, it was the fifth. It's unbelievable the way that it's the whole saga is allowed to just spin through and be accepted by everybody else. And now, what's Chelsea's bench going to be like when they've got 5 subs? When we're bringing on Atsu and they're bringing on Havertz, for example, or they're bringing on Mason Mount, because he's going to struggle to get into the team because Havertz plays in Mason Mount's position. It's they are. If somebody asked me who were the favourites were to win the Champions League or win the Premier League this season, on the strength of what they've done, I would look at Chelsea straight away. Chelsea's downfall, however, will be their manager, I think, because he's been given all the money and he's been given everything else, but whether or not he's got the tactical nous to be able to turn what they've got into something substantive on the pitch to get them up and beyond the likes of Liverpool and Man City is going to be very, very interesting. Whether he sees through the season, would they dare sack Frank Lampard? He's a god there. But they've given him and they've supported him and backed him 110% so far. And that just adds the pressure that he's going to be pulling down and having to have bearing on him, Have Liverpool bought anyone? City I can't recall. City.
Liverpool's brought one player. I can't remember who it was, but I have bought one player.
Some people might say, do they need to bring anybody? I think they probably do. I think they need to refresh that. I think they need to refresh certain positions. And I think they need to have a little bit more strength and depth in their squad. Whether or not the quality players have already been picked up by Chelsea, however, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Tom Dixon weighing in with Newcastle at odds of 9-4 to go down next season. No surprise there, Tom. You're not going to make much off that.
Thanks for that, Tom.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about Kennedy. I wouldn't have him back. Mitch, he's been linked again. Free player. I mean, I know Remy's been linked as well. I would probably take Remy if that was all that we could get. But again, he's a couple of years older, and there's no guarantees he's going to hit the ground running as he did last time. But Remy knows where the back of the net is. But I mean, you wouldn't take him.
Not for me.
No.
Kennedy either.
Test, didn't he? I mean, Remy failed a fitness test. He was supposed to be getting sold, and I think they found out there was something seriously wrong with him. I don't know whether it was his heart or what, because he certainly didn't have much heart at Newcastle. He didn't want to stay at Newcastle, did he? Kennedy, dear me. I mean, Kennedy was one of those players that from the second or third game onwards, it wasn't just a downward slope. It was like the highest level ski slope you've ever seen. I've never seen a bloke slip down the market as much as Kennedy did. You know?
Yeah, he was horrendous.
It was embarrassing to watch by the end, because he literally, he couldn't hit a barn door at 5 paces. He couldn't clear his first man. Even the skill that he showed when he first came, where he could beat a man, he could drop a shoulder, he could get past, he had all the tricks. Even the tricks were gone.
That second time round he was awful.
Daniels is pulling out more tricks. He's been dead for 5 years, and Kennedy's managed, for God's sake.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I can't see why on earth anyone would be linking us with that again at all. Who do you see coming in, Mitch? I mean, I think you've got the idea of what kind of market we're in. So, is there anybody out there that you'd like to see them go for or bring in?
Good question. At the minute, do they have 2 legs and are they fit? Mm-hmm. That seems to be the recruitment requirement at the moment. It's really frustrating. We're not even shopping in Poundland. We're going to the charity shops. Mm-hmm. That seems to be where we're at. Which again, you look at this like we said earlier. You look at the injuries we've got and we're dealing with, and the meltdown that's creating, and that's because we all know when we're sitting looking at that squad, saying, right, where we're going to stop the goals and where we're going to score the goals, which are the sort of the 2 main requisites of playing football, really. And when we're left asking questions like that, it's super frustrating. Look, if Troy Deeney, I would take him in a heartbeat. Can I see him at Newcastle United? No, I can't. I really can't, because I can't see anybody matching that ambition. That quote through the week about Higuain, and his heart isn't inspired by Newcastle United, which is a wonderful Italian translation, which is just a fluffy way of saying no thanks. Don't want to go there. And do you blame him? If you are somebody who potentially is a striker of some repute, wants to protect his reputation, coming to trudge around for Newcastle United and Steve Bruce isn't something that you're going to do. It really isn't. And I just can't see where these signings are coming from. But let's go back to this link today with Edouard, saying we're at the head of the queue with the chase for the Celtic striker. Yeah, right. Yeah, me, I'd be amazed if we're even in the queue. I think we're somewhere around the back of the drive-in, fumbling around the back of the chair for the change to pay for the bloody takeaway. We're certainly not at the head of the queue. I just don't see it. I've seen Ollie Watkins. Ollie Watkins is a really good player at Brentford. Brentford have a number of superb players that could do a job in the Premier League. I'm quite sure of that. Can I see we're signing absolutely any of them? No,
a couple of others there, Mitch. Adam Armstrong, we've been linked with, of course, who we let go. I saw somebody saying we should have signed Ivan Toney on. I mean, God, that's another one of our ex-players. Yeah. And Andrew Davis, of course, mentioning Sturridge, which seems to get a mention every single transfer window, but the guy just doesn't want to come to Newcastle. I mean,
he's not fit, and he does bizarre things on TikTok as well. So no.
Yeah. Well, look at Adam Armstrong. Would you swallow your pride and take him back? And he'd jump at the chance, I would imagine.
I'm sure you would. And this is again looks at the absolute state of our academy and the succession planning that we have and don't have. That if players coming through, if he's somebody that we're genuinely looking to sign, why didn't we just hang on to him and give him a bloody chance? Who's making these decisions? And who's putting these players forward to the first team? And who's saying, right, here's somebody with a bit of talent. We need to give him a run. You just see Neil Ranger, Blaney. But at the same time, when we had Neil Ranger and Andy Carroll coming through the system, I remember going to Blythe to watch us play at Blythe pre-season when we had Andy Carroll playing 45 minutes and Neil Ranger playing 45 minutes. We stood on the terraces at Blythe, me and Jamie and a couple of other lads, looking at these two kids thinking, bloody hell, we've got some good strikers here going forward. And then what? One kicks on and gets sold for a ridiculous amount of money. One turns into some sort of wannabe gangster because we can't support him properly. Adam Armstrong is a good kid. I get that from people who know him. Comes from a good family, good lad. But we'll let him go, and then we're going to pay 10 million to get him back. Really? This is a real, damning statement about our ability to bring kids through, put them into the first team, and do something with them.
Mm-hmm. Steve, what's your take on all of that? Then, as Dodge says, this is a way of coining it from Coutinho to Armstrong. Wow, what next? So we've got in no particular order. Take your pick out of all those players that have been named.
Yeah, I mean, Eze apparently is already saying that Eze for me would have been the equivalent of signing an Andy Cole. Go down to the non-league, the lower league, pick up a player that looks like he has potential but could be raw, and he's signed for Palace, right? £19.5 million. That's the equivalent of, like, for me, a £7.5 million signing of Andy Cole back in 1991, 1992, whenever it was. The reason we're saying Andy Cole was because we had Kevin Keegan. Because Kevin Keegan could convince him in the same way as he convinced Rob Lee to come, because he told him it was like, not as far north as Middlesbrough, for example. We had a charismatic manager who could convince a player that he could end up being a world beater when he came. I don't think we'll have that at the minute. So we've lost out on Eze as a £19.5 million signing from QPR. Ollie Watkins looks the part. He looks like the next type of Eze type player that a Kevin Keegan would have convinced to come to Newcastle, and would have turned round to the board and would have turned round to Sir John Hall and Freddie Shepherd and said, "That's the man I want. That's him. Go out and get him." And Freddie Fletcher would have been backing Kevin Keegan and would have gone, "I'll get him for you. I'll get him for you. We'll put the money together. We'll put the deal together. You go and convince the player." That's the way it operated at that particular time. There's nobody there. There's no Freddie Fletcher there to do that type of thing. The link between Keegan and the owner, the link with, somebody like Fletcher who had the charisma, he had the guts. And for a lot of people with the Save Our Seats campaign might like spit every time his name is mentioned. But the guy was a genius when it came to being the link between the owner and the manager, and being able to listen to both sides and convince both sides that he could pull a deal off for them if they were both behind it. He could convince Keegan that he could convince Sir John Hall. Keegan could come to him and all that type of thing. And so Ollie Watkins is another player. You mentioned Niall Ranger. The funniest story I ever heard about, I heard lots of funny stories about Niall Ranger, but the funniest one was from a local postman who told us he was on the Forest Hall run where my business is, and he told us that Niall Ranger, when you knocked on the door, it was always getting parcels. It was always like parcels coming to his house, and there was apparently he had a cardboard cutout of himself on the top of the landing. Right, and he goes, so whenever the door opened, you looked up the stairs and the door opened, and his lass would open the door, he goes, there's this cardboard cutout of him at the top of the landing. And he kept doing that as he was looking. He says, anyway, he says, I went there one day. He goes, the cardboard cutout was smashed to bits on the lawn because he'd fallen out with his lass. And instead of taking that out on him, she'd take that out on the cardboard cutout. And it was ripped to shreds and it was all over the lawn. And that was at the time when all the scandal was breaking about him because he was like a total crackerjack, you know. But he had the potential. I think we watched him play at St James's, and for me, he was ahead of Andy Carroll. He was at one point, mate. He was because he could pull off and he could come down and he could beat a man. Andy Carroll couldn't beat a man because Andy Carroll never had the pace, but Andy Carroll had the power. But the lad had an awful lot going for him, except in his head. There was nothing there, you know, and he wanted to be somewhere else, or he thought he was somewhere else, or he thought he was somebody else, you know. So getting back to the question, somebody mentioned Troy Deeney. He's 32. What that makes him the same age as Messi. We're not going for Messi. We'll not go for Troy Deeney. Let's put it that way. You know, if we want to make connections, Watkins would be a smashing buy. He would if the club genuinely had the whole package in terms of being able to convince a player that he could come and he could do a job and he would be wanted and he would get somewhere. But I don't think within the football club at the moment we have that sort of person. I don't think we've got it in management level, and I don't think we've got it at the boardroom level. And I think that is where we are. You know, I mean, there's a good one. Nixon convinced Lazaro to join us over Leipzig. Well, that worked well, didn't it? Where's he now? He's certainly not with us. You know, I just think the whole thing is, it's not even bargain basement. You know, we're not even in Poundland anymore. You know, we're in the penny shop. We're in the penny arcade. Quite frankly.
Oh God, it's not one to cheer people up. This one, we are. Yeah, I know we are. It's you know, if you don't laugh, you cry. Usually, as a Newcastle fan, but it's starting to get worse before it gets better. And just got to hope that something develops over the next couple of weeks to cheer us all up. But it really is like, you know, like you say, we're shopping in not even in the bargain basement. Oxfam, as Tim Cairns says, you know, and I think that's what you said, Mitch. It's where we're at.
Players to come to Newcastle, the other players around them, the other players alongside them, the players they're going to be playing with. The potential of the football club is one thing, but it's also what they actually see on the football pitch. Who's their teammates going to be? What quality of teammates are they going to be there? What can they learn from them, and what can they get from them? And what are those teammates going to do to make them better, you know? And what's Ollie Watkins look at? The only thing that Ollie Watkins will look at if he was interested in coming to Newcastle is that he might occasionally get a pass from John Joe Shelby, and that's. I mean, I know it sounds critical, but I cannot think of any. I cannot see him going, "Oh, I'm going to come for the slide rule pass of Isaac Hayden," or "I'm going to come because I'm going to get on the crosses that Atsu's going to throw in, or I'm actually going to get the ball passed to us by San Maximin." You know what I mean? He's going to look at it and go, "Well, I'm going to be feeding off scraps here. I'm going to be lucky if I can get that." I don't see where I can fit in because they're a totally different style of team to what I'm used to playing. And what would convince him would be a Kevin Keegan who would say, "This is the way that our team is going to play. This is where you'll fit in. This is how you'll slot in. This is what I'm expecting for you. And this is what the rest of the team will be expecting from you. And if you can give that, and I think you can, and in fact, I'm convinced you can, then you're the man for me. And that's why I want you. Come on, son. Let's see. Let's show. What did Keegan say? I'll get you in the England squad. I'll get you in the England squad." That's what Keegan he kept saying that to Andy Cole. "I'll get you in the England squad. I promise I'll get you in the England squad." You know, Andy came and he was, next thing you know, you talked about it a couple of nights ago, 41 goals, you know. Yes, he had a Peter Beardsley alongside him, but somebody told him, "You're going to get passes from Peter Beardsley. Peter Beardsley's going to make you," because Peter Beardsley was had already established himself and played for England God knows how many times and shown the quality that he had, and then come back to Newcastle United and was there just at the right time to make other players better. Who's going to make players in our squad better? None of them.
Yeah, no, you're right. Good points made by both of you. Last 10 minutes. We're only doing 90 minutes tonight, guys, because I've got to get off to watch Dunstan play Blythe Spartans. And there's fans allowed in, which, of course, brings us to my final topic of tonight's show. We have a game tomorrow where Brighton take on Chelsea. And they've got some fans in as well. So first games where fans have been allowed into the ground. What's your take on it, Mitch? Is it too soon, or should we be going down this this route now and just going for it and hoping for the best?
Cynically, let's see how long it lasts.
Yeah.
I've seen stuff from the Football League. I know somebody who's very well connected, Stevenage, who was told when they are allowed fans back in, they're only allowed 5%. So that's 400 fans. And for them, what's the point of that? Yes, I tell you something, and I think we've touched on this before, the absence of fans from games over the last few weeks has showed how important the fans are. And showed how important our presence at games really is, and probably solidifies the fans' role within the game and emboldens certain organisations who support fans to say, hey, yeah, look, this is how important we are. The absence of fans has really been felt. Mm-hmm. And the absence of fans has certainly been felt probably a championship down in particular in terms of how much money and income so many clubs are hand them out. They're relying on gate receipts to keep going. It's going to change football forever. I still remain convinced about this, that the post-COVID football world will be forever changed because of this. So yeah, I get why getting people back into the grounds is important. How do you then go on and select who can come in? How do you then police what they do? I've seen this thing where they talk about don't chant. That's like putting somebody in a cage with a tiger and saying don't eat him. How can you not get involved and wrapped in the passion of the game, and not chant and not say something? Keep your mask on. Don't spray, don't be generating aerosols and all that stuff that I deal with day in, day out in here where I'm sat at the minute. I'm actually at work at the moment because it was nearby to where I was, so I thought the best place to dip into was work. And we deal with this constantly about minimising spray and minimising aerosols. But how can you genuinely say to a group of fans come to the ground but stay quiet and sit in your hands and do that? That's just as bad. And yeah, let's see how long it lasts. Because for me, frustration. It'll just lead to frustration. It'll just lead to more problems. It'll not solve them.
Steve, Mark Anderson's doing the maths. 5% of 52,000, 2,600. He says, "Is it worth it? Is it worth it?"
You know what? When I saw that pop up, I thought, the type of football we're going to be playing, we're looking to get 2,600 willing to volunteer to go in, to be perfectly honest, because I kind of, it doesn't excite you. It's not going to, the match day experience, it's more than just going into the ground, isn't it? It's meeting your mates beforehand. It's being in a strawberry, in a packed strawberry. It's singing. It's being at the food bank. It's chatting to the lads at the food bank donation station on match days that Bill Corcoran and Colin Whittle and myself and the rest of the team do. It's that camaraderie. It's the mixing afterwards. It's the conversation about the game, as well as and in fact, in some cases, it's more than the game, because we've seen some dross over the last few years, and especially last season. there's been nothing to excite you inside St James's Park other than maybe, 2 games, one of which, let's say the Chelsea game, where we scored in the 94th minute, where we're absolutely wiped the floor by Chelsea. And then we scored when Hayden scored that goal in the 94th. Other than that, there was nothing inside St James's Park excited me and excited many, many other people. But the crap with your mates, which you're not even going to be able to have because you're going to be in a bubble type of pub, or you're going to be in a bubble type 1892 club, or a bubble platinum club, or you're going to have no catering facilities, and you're going to have reduced access to toilets, etc., 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 and so it goes on. Then you're going to have the situation with away games. Who's going to go to an away game? Are you going to be allowed to travel to an away game? Who's going to dictate who the 2,600 are, if that was the figure? The 5% that are allowed into St James's Park. Or we're going to get in 1 every 6, 1 every 8. With 36,000 season ticket holders. How are you going to do that? Is it going to be like it did with what was it? They did with, I think it was, you had to have an odd number or an even number on your car registration to go to the tip. Is it going to be working like that? Is it like
Athens did that to stop pollution at the town centre, and then what everybody did was then go out and buy another car with the opposite of what they had, so everything just stayed the same. There's no real proper solution to it. I mean, I gather Stevenage's 5% comes from their facilities and about how you can social distance. I guess for us at St James's Park, with better facilities, more toilets, everything a bit more spaced out, we may be up to 30%.
Yeah, but it's going to look like a League Cup game, isn't
it? Still rubbish. And again, how do you decide? And who decides? We're back to loyalty points, or we're back to that super fan thing where my points are bigger than your points, and I've been going for years, and I deserve to come into every game. But no stuff you, because you can't. Is it done on numbers? Is it done on lottery? How do you do it?
Tell you what, Mitch, it's not up to the Premier League. It's not up to the football club. It's not up to the NUST. It's not up to the FSA. It's up to the supporters of Newcastle United, working with the football club right across the board to decide how this is done. This is much bigger than any of those organisations. Yeah. They can all speak on behalf of sections of their fan base or sections of their membership or whatever. But this Newcastle United need to open their mouths and they need to tell us what their thinking is on how this is going to work. And there needs to be a massive debate over the next 6 weeks before we get to October, and the point where they're going to start to allow some fans in, because this debate needs to happen and it needs to start now. It can't happen behind closed doors, behind organisations and behind individuals who may have a vested interest. It's got to be open. Every season ticket holder has to play a part, or has to be given the opportunity to play a part in deciding what happens and who goes into St James's Park on a particular day, on a particular match. We can't have it decided behind closed doors or by a ticket office expert or an FSA representative or an organisation that thinks they can come in like PKMG or somebody like that. They aren't the people that decide. The people that decide are the supporters themselves. This is the nub of, this is the issue. This is the problem we've got. And there's nobody at the football club talking. Nobody. They're not talking about anything. They're not entering into any dialogue.
Because we're a ghost ship.
Yes.
But just a ghost ship, limping along with minimal staff, minimal interaction, and some people who are totally hamstrung by the idiots above them.
Yeah, the Trust obviously sent out a questionnaire last night. I mean, they're obviously trying to find out what their membership are interested in saying about it.
And that's great. They've got 14,000 members, so they can have a voice on that. But that means there's a lot more people who aren't members who still need a voice in this.
Exactly,
and still need to be able to be engaged. And that's why what Steve says is absolutely right. It's really good that the Trust are reaching out to their membership to ask about this, because these are the kind of questions we absolutely have to have answered,
Yeah. And And it's a disgrace as well. There's a lot of people still waiting for the refunds from last season, you know. And again, nothing said on that. But that's a completely separate thing. But I have seen people emailing and finally getting responses, which it's better late than never. And it's been called an oversight. I mean, God, it's always an oversight when it's, you know, when it's a financial situation. But the clock's beating us, lads. Apologies to those of you who were expecting 2 hours, but football calls. Got to grab your match whilst you can. Tomorrow, I'm having a day off, but there will be a show. I did a lovely interview with comedian Gavin Webster, another big Newcastle fan who you know, doesn't hold back on his opinions, and we even get his very first joke that he wrote down and performed. And yeah, he talks a little bit about his career on the circuit, how it all started off. Talks about Newcastle United, of course. Talks about his favourite game, his favourite player, and all that. Very much like the Steve Harmison one, which is also available on the channel, which I did the other night, and seems to have gone down rather well. Everybody enjoyed hearing what the Ashton Express had to say. So just get on the channel, give it a subscribe, and there's always plenty of content. But I will be back with the lads from Worldwide on Sunday at 3 o'clock. And I'll be back with you, gentlemen, next Friday. As always, Steve Hastie and Mitch. And Mitch, we'll let you go back out and enjoy the rest of your night. Thanks for taking 90 minutes off. Thanks for taking 90 minutes off and not being too hammered, mate. I really appreciate it. And Steve, you've had a long drive backwards and forwards to Glasgow.
Myself, to be fair.
I have, yes. But the daughter's home, so that's good. She's now going into 14 days lockdown, but that's the price you have to pay for living in Dubai, I suppose.
It is. And all the comments coming in, thanks very much. Sorry we didn't get across all of those questions. We did our best, but thanks very much for tuning in as always, folks. Give it a like, give it a thumbs up, give it a share, and we'll see you next Friday. Take care, lads. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
Shukran.